Time now to take a look at some stories across the world that have caught our eye in Behind the Headlines. And we start with one of our main stories. The Guardian Nigeria reporting on the ongoing clashes over police brutality and Tuesday's incident where soldiers allegedly opened fire on protesters who defied a curfew. Le Figaro reports on France's highest award being given posthumously to the teacher who was killed after he showed his pupils cartoons of the Prophet Mohammed. The Washington Post is providing live updates as Barack Obama hits the campaign trail for Joe Biden with less than 2 weeks to go before the US presidential election. And finally, the Evening Standard is full of admiration for Iceland's Prime Minister, Katrína Jakobsdóttir, who carried on with an interview even though she got caught in the middle of an earthquake. Joining me to review these stories are the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson, and French-Algerian journalist Nabila Ramdani. Good to have both of you with us. So we're kicking off with Nigeria. Witnesses say soldiers opened fire on a crowd of over 1,000 people in Lagos. Nigel, there's some dispute over what happened. Amnesty International says several civilians were killed, but it is without doubt, the growing protests that we're seeing across Nigeria are causing some real unrest.
Yes, it is, and this is against the so-called SARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, and we don't know quite how many people were killed in this shooting, but we certainly know that a number were injured. What this has done, of course, is provoked huge international condemnation. So our own Foreign Secretary in the UK has come out against it. So has the United Nations. Most interesting, I think, is the fact that Joe Biden is also got into the fray. And what you've got there in America, obviously they've suffered their own police brutality over there. America gives Nigeria about $100 million a year in overseas aid, and there's going to be a problem coming up as far as Nigeria is concerned about whether or not that will continue. So what President Buhari has got to do is get a grip on this situation. Certainly he's got to look at SARS and see what he can do about them. But otherwise he could be facing a loss of overseas aid and possible sanctions.
Yeah, and as Nigel says, Nabila, Joe Biden wading into this, lots of officials, Hillary Clinton, also celebrities and sports stars. There's clearly a lot of support for the protesters over this issue of police brutality.
Well, yes, indeed. And beyond the terrifying health implications, the horror of the coronavirus pandemic is that it's exacerbating all kinds of other problems in society. And this is an example of a notoriously repressive and indeed corrupt government using the pandemic as an excuse to clamp down on its own population. Nigeria has been particularly having particularly serious problems with police brutality, and the pandemic is making things far worse. And as Nigel said, this is all to do with the so-called special anti-robbery squads. Of course, anti-robbery is a euphemism for particularly brutal squads of police who carry out acts of violence against people. And in turn, the police pretend that they are solely preventing robberies. But atrocities that are carried out by these SARS groups have included acts of torture. I think Nigeria, has massive oil wealth and is one of Africa's largest economies, but many of its more than 200 million people face a very high level of poverty and lack basic services, and this should concern everybody. But typically, the president, Muhammadu Buhari, has meanwhile said very little indeed about the protests and engulfing his country and beyond making the usual appeals for calm. And I have to say, there's an Arab Spring type feel to what is going on with young people taking to the streets, for more than 2 weeks after a video showed these SARS squads attacking a protester.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out and what kind of wider international reactions we see. Let's move on to France. The memorial service has taken place there for the teacher beheaded after showing pictures of Prophet Mohammed. Nabila, I do want to start with you because of your French background, because what is very evident at the moment is that there are tensions rising in France. There's this dichotomy between the government trying to stamp out terror attacks, but Muslims feeling that they're all being collectively blamed for the act of one individual.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, terrorism carried out in the name of Islam, albeit a terrifying corruption of Islam, naturally leads to a rise in Islamophobia. And we've seen that time and time again in the past. And there is no doubt that the barbaric murder of the French teacher Samuel Paty on Friday by a Chechen terrorist has led to numerous attempts to spread guilt among some 6 million Muslims living in France. There was, for example, a horrific stabbing underneath the Eiffel Tower on Sunday when 2 French-Algerian women were stabbed. And the evidence so far suggests that it was racially aggravated, and those responsible face attempted murder charges. The great fear, more generally, is that people consider that attacks on religion and indeed culture should somehow be considered acceptable because monstrous individuals are carrying out crimes in the name of a gross perversion of Islam. A national homage ceremony was held at the Sorbonne this evening in Paris.
Let me bring in Nigel, because you make a good point there about the policies that are being pursued by France at the moment. And Nigel, a lot of opinion seems to be that President Macron has brought in this campaign against what he calls radical Islam because he's looking ahead to the presidential election and he's trying to get those right-wing votes.
Well, I'm sure there's an element of truth in that when these kind of attacks happen, that provokes a lot of anti-Islamic feeling. It also is a gift to the right who are trying to get a clampdown on immigration. So, yes, certainly President Macron must be looking towards the votes there. I mean, I think that the debate in France that's going on at the moment is over freedom of speech and then the right of people who believe in certain religions to not to have freedom of speech being offensive to them. So freedom of speech carries with it a responsibility to actually use it wisely. And obviously, if you've got 1 in 10 French people are Muslim, 70% of those object to depictions of the Prophet Mohammed. They find it highly offensive. You've got to try and balance this argument of freedom of speech against whether it's right to offend people in the way that these kind of things do. It doesn't take away from the absolute horror of it, but it's something that has to be considered.
Absolutely. And also, Nigel, I wanted to ask, there's this idea that, the whole Muslim world has to stand up and condemn the acts of one refugee from Chechnya, which we never ask Christian communities to do or Chinese Buddhists to do when a horrific killing is carried out by one of their number. Why is it down to the Muslim population to have to be seen to, roundly condemn someone they have no connection with and don't agree with?
Well, I don't think it should be. I mean, really, it's a matter for all of us to condemn acts of terrorism and something as horrific as this.
Absolutely. Look, let's move on to Barack Obama. I love this story. Barack Obama hitting the campaign trail in person to stump for his former running mate. Nabila, he's clearly the big gun, isn't he? That's being brought out. Why has it been so late, though? It's 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks to go.
He's indeed the big gun, but there's a bit of controversy behind his support for Biden. I mean, it's well known that Obama has privately voiced doubts about the ability of Joe Biden, who is his former vice president, to beat Trump. And Obama failed to endorse any candidate during the Democrat primaries. And he was reported as saying that Biden could easily mess up the election. He, in fact, used very crude language to say this, showing how strong his feelings were on the subject. Now, Obama's main concern are the concerns of many Democrats, and that is that Biden is too old and does not have the ultimate or dare I say, this intimate connection with the electorate. Having said that, Obama knows he now knows, that his backing could prove, very useful and indeed vital for Biden. Obama's primary goal will be to energize the many younger and more progressive voters who dislike or indeed distrust Mr. Biden and bridge the Democrats' ideological division. And this will be particularly important among groups such as Black voters, for example. A lot of Bernie Sanders supporters were very anti-Biden, for example, and Obama will be very useful indeed to try to win them over.
Isn't the danger, though, when you have someone as such an amazing speaker as Barack Obama, that it could end up highlighting the shortcomings of Joe Biden? What do you think, Nigel?
Well, I think that's probably true. And Nabila is right that that Barack Obama has only actually joined the campaign trail at this very late stage, not because he particularly wanted to, but because Joe Biden is in some trouble. Although he's ahead of the polls, he's not doing so well in the swing states, which will actually decide the election. So I still think there's everything to play for in this election, that President Trump, he may have handled COVID badly, but he's still pre-COVID got unemployment down to a 50-year low in America. Wages of the low paid went up.
Are you predicting a much closer race than we all think it's going to be?
Well, yes, I do actually. Yeah, I mean, the thing about the American system is don't look at the popularity of a candidate in the polls. You've got to look at those key states because of their electoral college system for electing a president.
OK, and I know in this case he's going to be doing it on, apparently, people in cars are going to listen to him over the radio. So I think that'll be an interesting way of listening to Barack Obama. Let's move on to our final story. This is something you highlighted, Nigel. This is Iceland's Prime Minister, who apparently was interrupted during a press interview by an earthquake. Nigel, tell us what happened.
Well, I mean, she was actually quite remarkable that she was giving an interview to the Washington Post, and suddenly, right in the middle of it, that an earthquake of a 5.5 magnitude suddenly hit. Now here she is as the earthquake comes, but she immediately gets her composure back and carries on quite happily with the interview. I know how she felt. In my foreign correspondent days, I was caught by an earthquake when I wasn't expecting it. But at the time, I was confined to my hotel with a really nasty stomach bug, and I didn't know if it was my stomach, the earthquake.
Oh my goodness! What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, Nabila? Because we all do these Zoom interviews now endlessly. Has anything happened to you? Obviously not an earthquake. Well, I hope not an earthquake.
Not really, but we all get used to all these kind of strange things happening during a Zoom or a Skype interview, and it usually involves children's or pet animals walking into view, or more usually maybe the sound connection going. But I have to say this clip certainly takes the prize. And what I found particularly amusing is that the Prime Minister was explaining the earthquake as if it was a bus going by. And she remained remarkably calm and also she gave me a bit of information, because I didn't realize how frequent earthquakes were, in fact, in Iceland. But the good news, I suppose, is that nobody was hurt in the end.
Yes, apparently, I didn't know about Iceland either. Apparently, it is extremely seismically active. I mean, Nigel, I'm guessing it's on some kind of tectonic plate. But I mean, whatever the reason, the fact that you can keep calm and carry on because I've been in the middle of an earthquake, and it really does feel like suddenly you're standing on water. I don't know if you've experienced an earthquake, but it feels like you're standing on water, and it's quite a disorientating feeling. But yeah, she did brilliantly, didn't she, Nigel?
You did indeed. I mean, I mean, earthquakes are actually quite terrifying things. I mean, I remember it being a bit like a strobe light going off as everything was shaking. But I'm not quite sure I could be as calm as her if suddenly an earthquake hit the UK now while we're in the middle of this.
But as long as your stomach's OK, Nigel, that is the main thing. Guys, thank you, both of you, for joining us here, Nabila and Nigel, for this edition of Behind the Headlines.